Welcome to Nightlight. Step away from the mainstream and gather around as we enlighten the world and our realities and travel this cosmic journey we call life. Join us as we share with you and provide that beacon that can guide us all to a better way. Explore with us as we examine a metaphysical montage of spiritual insights, covering everything from the mundane to the magical, UFOs to unicorns, and everything in between. This is a time of awakening, of sharing and evolving, of spreading our wings and soaring on the cosmic breath of creation. Come and join with other light-minded spirits as we weave our lights together to seek understanding, enlightenment, and with a little luck, some wisdom. This is Nightlight, a reminder that you are never alone.
Welcome, everybody, to Nightlight. Thanks for joining me and my guest. It's going to be a very exciting evening because this is one of those areas that is near and dear to my heart. I have Mark Ireland with me tonight, and he's written a book called The Persistence of the Soul, Mediums, Spirit Visitations, and Afterlife Communication. You're going to really resonate to this material, those of you who have followed me for 14 or 15 years, at least on Blog Talk. After the unexpected passing of his youngest son, Mark Ireland began a search for messages from the afterlife and discovered remarkable proof of life after death. Interweaving profound personal experience and compelling scientific evidence, he presents a deep dive into psychic medium phenomena, spirit visitations, afterlife communication, reincarnation, synchronicity, and near-death experiences, pointing to the survival of consciousness after bodily death. He details how he confronted his resistance to engaging in the spiritual and parapsychological practices of his deceased father, prominent 20th century psychic Dr. Richard Ireland, who counseled celebrities such as Mae West and the Eisenhower family. On his journey, he meets with respected mediums who deliver unexpected messages from his son, his father, and others who have passed, and explores the healing impact that such messages can have on people who are grieving. He shares his interviews with mediums to understand how they see, hear, and feel the information they receive from the spirits of the deceased. And he explains how to recognize fraudulent mediums. Important there. Pay attention when we get there. Mark presents detailed accounts of scientific experiments conducted to obtain evidence for the continuity of consciousness, including his own test involving a secret message left behind by his deceased sister, Robin. The contents of this message were unknown to any living person and remained sealed in an envelope until Mark received messages from a group of mediums. He exposes deceptive arguments made by skeptics and examines mediumship through the lens of multiple religious traditions, even including some factions who seek to demonize the practice. Showing how spirit communication can be undeniably accurate and also frustratingly ambiguous, he reveals the profound healing and transformative possibilities available to those who come to believe in the persistence of the soul. Mark, got to change glasses. Mark is a co-founder of Helping Parents Heal and author of 2 books, including the groundbreaking Soul Shift, Finding Where the Dead Go, and The Persistence of the Soul, both of which explore evidence for the continuity of consciousness after physical death. Mark's father, Richard Ireland, was a renowned 20th century psychic medium who counseled many famous people in his time. and it's a phenomenal, unbelievable book that takes you into realms that we've all wondered about, but he delved into them so beautifully and so masterfully that it does make you feel a little more comfortable with the fact that there is consciousness or awareness of the spirit after the physical experience of death. Welcome to the show, Mark. I'm so glad you could be with us tonight.
Thanks, Barb. I think my publisher gave you the longest bio in the history of mankind, or humankind.
No, I did that myself.
Oh, well, thank you for the intro. We covered about everything there. I guess we don't need to talk now. I'm just kidding.
Oh, so far from the truth on that one. I know that mediums have gotten a real tough run of belief and disbelief, and I think that it's important that we really do go into it. I think it's fascinating that after growing up with a very famous psychic medium, that you were reluctant to kind of put your toe in the pool, so to speak, until your young son died. What was it that prompted you to begin this search to discover if there is really proof of existence after the physical death?
Well, really going back to when I grew up with the father that I had, a man who kind of knew everything that was going on all the time in the household, where you couldn't get away with much of anything, and also seeing him, deliver messages to people that he didn't know, both in the psychic environment, but also seeing these spirit communication messages come through with great specificity, names and details about the nature of the relationship with the person, and maybe hobbies, what they did for a living, and then telling them how much that person loves them and that kind of thing. I grew up not really fearing death, but understanding that there is more, that there's another realm that we go to after this life, and consciousness isn't just generated by the brain, but it's obviously primary. It's got to be something, it's a bit of a mystery to us as human beings that we don't really understand it, but it gave me the confidence seeing those things to know that I didn't really need to fear death. And I was always proud of my father, but I never really wanted to be him per se. He always said that I was very psychic, but I just couldn't see that compared to what he did. So I guess in a way, it was a couple of things. One is, if your dad is Michael Jordan or Kobe Bryant, are you going to really want to play basketball? So that was part of it. I also saw, how he had to deal with skeptics all the time, and he would stand up to them, and he submitted to testing and all kinds of things. But still, I just saw that as a drag, where you're having to constantly deal with people who are berating you or questioning you and your legitimacy. Also, we were just different people. I was very pragmatic and practical, and he was a little more live for the moment, live for the day kind of person. So I just went down more of a conventional path, I got married at a young age. I got a degree. I went into business. We had a couple of boys. And I was really just focused on my career and all the mainstream kind of lifestyle stuff. But my youngest son, Brandon, unexpectedly passed while climbing the mountains behind our home in Scottsdale, Arizona, the McDowell Mountains, at the age of 18. And that really shook me to a point where it became the catalyst to draw me back into this field, to investigate it in a variety of ways, not just to prove it, but to experience it, to really have a sense of connection with my son and to understand it better. I understood my dad from the time I grew up with him as a kid, but I wanted to know more. And then things just started coming together for me to meet a variety of top mediums, researchers in the field, and just learn more about not just mediumship, which is kind of my primary area of interest, but also the other types of phenomena that are supportive of this hypothesis that there's life after death, including like near-death experiences, after-death communications that are spontaneous, where people have a direct kind of connection, the reincarnation research that's been done, terminal lucidity, all these kinds of things that kind of put a mosaic together that form a body of evidence that's pretty compelling. So that's kind of really what drew me back. It was my son's unexpected passing that made me want to do that, and also to restore my dad's legacy, which he's kind of been, he was kind of lost to history.
Well, you discovered a book he had written, and basically said it isn't the right time for it now, but it will be later, sort of.
Yeah, that was very interesting process. So one of the earliest things that happened, I think it was 3 weeks after my son passed, I was watching a news excerpt on the NBC affiliate in Phoenix, and they were showing some research being done at the University of Arizona involving mediums under blinded conditions. And so the first medium they were testing in this was actually Alison Dubois, who later became famous because of the network show Medium. And she couldn't see the sitters. She couldn't directly, have eye contact with them, and she couldn't converse with them directly. She had to go through a third party and a researcher who was asking her questions. And she gave a lot of highly detailed information that was really impressive. It wasn't vague at all. And then they debriefed afterward with the sitters, and I mean, she was just right on the money on all these things. And I thought, geez, I'd love to have a reading with her, and I'd love to be in that lab someday. And later, both those things happened. And what was most ironic was the very next day, I got a call from a man named Jerry Conser from Dallas, Texas, who had been friends with my father. By this point, my dad had been gone for 12 years. But Jerry said, hey, Mark, I know someone who might be able to help you. Her name's Alison Dubois, and here's a phone number you can call to get a reading. So I thought that was rather synchronistic to find out, see that a day after a day after. So I set up an appointment with her, but she was, even then, before the show Medium came out, she was very popular. So it was like August, and this was February, so it was, a number of months later before I could get in to see her. But when I did, just 2 weeks before I saw her, a man gave me a box, and inside the box was a manuscript, all typed 8.5 by 11 pages. It said, Your Psychic Potential, A Guide to Psychic Development by Richard Ireland, dated 1973. And I'm like, where'd you get this? And he said, well, your dad gave it to me before he passed because you were out of state at the time. I said, well, why are you giving it? Because that's 12 years ago. Why are you giving this to me now? And he says, I don't know. I just feel like I'm supposed to. And then 2 weeks later, I have the reading with Allison. She doesn't know hardly anything about me. We go in there, and I've not actually told that to anyone at that point. I go in, and she says, well, and one of the first things she said to me is, your father's here, and showing me a book. But I believe it's his book, but he's handing it to you to take forward. Does that make sense? And I'm like, yep, I think I get that. So that's how that book ended up in my hands. And I was actually able to get it published in 2011, which was pretty cool. And that book, basically is his. It was based on workshops he was doing in the late 60s and early 70s to help people develop their own abilities in the area of intuition and psychic phenomenon. And, so I wrote the foreword to the book, and it was interesting because part of what I wrote that I felt was, that there was a sacred nature to what he was trying to teach, and it shouldn't be taken lightly. It should be for those interested in providing service to others, and shouldn't be jumped into just for someone to prop their ego up or to anything like that. And I also said, it was curious to me that my father never had the book published back in 73. And I just felt like he didn't feel the timing was right, like the world wasn't ready for it, but now it was time. And another medium told me that before and I'd already written that down. And then Debbie Martin told me that my dad said it was, he didn't release it because it wasn't time, and now it is time. So that was rather interesting. And then I found a document that he had written that was in a manila envelope in a bunch of stored documents called To the Would-Be Medium. And when I read that, almost everything in it was what I had written in the foreword about the nature of the book and how it, was a sacred nature and you should undertake this for the right reasons only. And so, that's the story of that book. Well,
it's amazing because if someone is that connected, that you do get a feeling from time to time that time isn't right for this, and it's time, you have to wait. And if people actually do wait, then then things flow so much better. And it's fascinating that he had the wherewithal to be able to hold it back, to be able to say, it's not the right time yet, but the time will come and you'll know it, and Spirit will just open the doors. And that's what happens if people are patient and sensitive. Unfortunately, the ego gets in there and screws with it sometimes.
Yeah, I think there's no question. If you look at the world today, many people are much more open to these things now than back in the early 70s.
Oh, yeah. People in the early 70s and the 80s, they were going to psychics and mediums all over the place for answers that were actually within themselves, but they just didn't trust it. So that now people are becoming more and more attuned to that element within themselves, that small voice within. And I'm just so excited to see it, because now I'm seeing people or having people call and ask for, how do I develop this tool? Not how, tell me what's going to happen, but how do I open this tool within me in order to be able to get this information myself? I think it's fabulous.
Yep, no doubt.
So you did get a message from, you did go to this medium, and she did give you information. And did that kind of set you on the trail of studying mediumship or understanding what mediums are and how they work? How did that come about?
Well, it played a role in it, but the meeting with Allison was actually later. I had other experiences first. Like, I think the first thing that happened after Brandon passed, where I wanted a sense of a direct connection, I actually went into my walk-in closet, turned off the light, shut the door, and tried to meditate and ask for a direct connection. And this is probably the first experience I had, and I saw his face scroll across my mind's eye, smiling, and I felt joy, and he was actually glowing. And then immediately after that, I saw a symbol, which was a cross with an oval loop at the top. And I had seen those, but I didn't know what they meant. So when I was done, I had to go Google it. I found out that it was an Ankh, which is the oldest cross of human history, going back about 5,000 years to the ancient Egyptians, with the lower portion symbolizing physical life and the oval loop symbolizing eternal life. So that was meaningful to me, because it gave me something I had to research that I didn't know. So it couldn't have been my subconscious mind just trying to make me feel better. I felt, being somewhat analytical, that gave me something that I had to kind of look up the meaning to confirm what I was seeing. And then on the third day after Brandon passed, I spoke to my uncle. Now, my uncle and dad had similar abilities because it was my dad's brother. My dad had passed by then, like I said, 12 years earlier, but my uncle was still around. And he asked if he could do anything, and I just said, well, if you get any kind of message or whatever, please let me know. And here it was, day 3, I'm in the mortuary. We connect by cell phone, and he says, hey, Mark. And at this time, we didn't know the cause of death. We just knew Brandon had been climbing on the mountain with his buddies. He complained to his best friend about numbness in his arms, and he felt like his heart was beating rapidly before he passed. We didn't have anything else. The authorities wouldn't tell us anything, and no autopsy had been done at that point. So my uncle calls, or we connect by phone. He says, hey, Mark, I wanted to let you know I tried to connect last night, and I couldn't get anything, but this morning I was doing my meditation, and that's how I start every day. He says, your dad came to me during that, and he wanted to let you know that he was there for Brandon when Brandon crossed. Brandon was a little confused at first, but your dad helped him adjust and go forward. He said, Brandon wanted you to know you're the best parents you ever could have had, which is the thing we like to hear. But then I got the evidence. He said, Brandon's death, your dad said Brandon's death was caused by a lack of oxygen in his bloodstream that caused his heart to fail. 2 days later, the autopsy physician calls me and says, your son's death was caused by a severe asthma attack that drove his blood oxygen level down, causing cardiac arrest. So I got the cause of death 2 days before that from my uncle. So those are the two earliest things. And then obviously, the story with Allison came along thereabouts. I'd say one of the most prominent experiences, which was in my first book, happened 6 months after Brandon's passing. So on the day Brandon passed, there was another group that was hiking that came up and tried to help them. And one gentleman in that group, his name was James Linton. He had signed into our online obituary at the time and said that he was on the mountain. He gave us his contact info and said, if you'd like to meet, just call me. So we did. We called him, and he told us what he knew and what he had encountered. And, he was very gracious. And then we found out he was a musician. He played guitar, he sang, he composed music, and he had his own in-home studio. So anyhow, fast forward 6 months, we'd become good friends with James by that time. So we were going on a cruise, and the cruise was really to honor Brandon. It was for his high school graduation, but since he couldn't go with us physically, we still wanted to go. So we took our older son, Stephen, we took Brandon's buddy, Stu, who had been on the mountain with him that day trying to resuscitate him. So before leaving, though, James Linton had asked if he could borrow Brandon's bass guitar, because Brandon was a bassist, and James didn't have a bass for his recording of this new material he was working on. So we said, sure, you can use it. So we left the bass with him. We go for a week on this cruise. We come back. The day that we come back, my wife is sitting, this is minutes after walking in the door. She's sitting at the foot of our bed, and she feels another presence in there, and she knows it's Brandon. She just feels it's Brandon, and then she sees him out of her peripheral vision as a shadow figure. Uh-huh. Well, the very next day, James calls us, and he says, hey, Susie, I've got something to tell you, but I don't know how to say it. And she was afraid he'd broken Brandon's bass guitar. It wasn't that at all. He said, well, I was in recording this new music, this new song, and I felt another presence in the studio with me. And then I saw a shadow figure out of my peripheral vision. And then I saw flashes of white light, and I thought I was hallucinating. So I took a shower, I drank water, I ate something, but each time I came back, it got stronger. And I finally gave in and said, okay, Brandon, what do you want me to do? And at that point, he felt guided to redo the bass line and the lyrics to this song. And he told us this song, which is called The Other Side, he says, this is the best song I've ever written, but I didn't write it. So that was a pretty phenomenal experience, with or without the song, for them to have an identical presence experience with the shadow figure that they both saw peripherally. It was pretty phenomenal. And then I met, with a number of other mediums and researchers after that just kind of added to my knowledge base and my experience base.
Well, yeah, and I know that there are mediums all over the place, and it's quite a feat to find a medium that you feel is authentic. And I believe that most people who say they're a medium truly do believe they are a medium, but it's a matter of what level of mediumship is there, and can you trust it? And I think one of the important things that I want to get out to people is, how do you identify a medium who is authentic and a medium who is not? And I know it's not absolute, but what are the guidelines you would give people?
Well, really, I've tried to simplify that for people, because what I did 10 years ago, or almost 10 years ago, is I started a medium certification program. I don't make a dime off of it. Everything that I've put into it has been thousands of dollars for the website development, all the time it takes to test these people, and put the whole program together. And I started this because after my first book, Soul Shift, came out, I was barraged with people asking, who could I see? Who's a good medium? And I knew a handful at that time, but they were mainly celebrity-type mediums with long wait lists, and some charged more than people wanted to pay. So I thought, there have to be other good people out there that can do this. They're just lesser known. So I put it out there, and I put together a program to test them. And the protocols I developed after coming into contact with Dr. Emily Williams Kelly of the University of Virginia Division of Perceptual Studies, who actually included me as a test sitter in a mediumship study she was doing. So I asked her a lot of questions about her process, and then I kind of mirrored those. And then I reached out to my friend Tricia Robertson, who's with the Scottish Society of Psychical Research. She's the former president of that organization. She kind of helped me refine it. And then over the years, I've toughened the standards about 4 times. And what I've done is, if somebody wants to apply, they have to go through a series of 5 readings that are blinded. They're conducted by Zoom with no video. They don't know who they're reading for. At the beginning of the reading, they're given the first name of the person, and that's all. The video is off for a substantial portion. We allow it to come on later. But essentially, it's all graded on the basis of statistical accuracy. How accurate are they in terms of the things they say? Are the statements correct and able to be validated by the sitter? Are they substantial? Are they important? Like where bonus points could be awarded if, say, they got the kid's name that passed, or they got his favorite food exactly, or what he did for a living, the person that they're talking about, things like that. So through almost 10 years, I've certified 41 of them. So there's a profile in each one. It tells you where they're based, how to contact them, what they charge, all that kind of stuff, and links to their website. And they have to go through that gauntlet to pass. And I will tell you that it's not easy. I mean, I think today, like the ones that are applying within the last year, I'd say we're only passing maybe 15% of them. And I think that goes back to what you had talked about, where there's a lot of people who think they have this, and they're either a little deluded or they're just not as good, not good enough to be reading for grieving people. Maybe they have a little bit of intuition or they're a little bit of that, but, I'm dealing with people who are dealing with grief. So I want to give them the best possible resource. And you can never guarantee a good reading, but you increase the chances if you're dealing with somebody credible who's been through something like that. And those aren't the only good mediums out there. I know a number of others, but they're like, they don't really need to go through that. I already know they're good, and they're busier than heck. They don't have time. They're doing some of them up to 5 readings a day. But at least I have a resource there for folks, so you don't have to worry about it. But if you're going to somebody and not going to a resource like I'm offering, you want to go into it with the medium not knowing anything up front. You don't want to talk during the reading. So first off, you'd want somebody who's highly recommended by somebody who trusts, who's level-headed, who got good information that couldn't have been ascertained by any social media or any means like that, or through cold reading. Cold reading is a process where somebody allegedly could, look at your facial expressions and ask you questions to kind of lead you down a path, and then you're kind of feeding the medium. So those are things you don't want to do. You don't want to be cold and hard. You want to be friendly and warm and have a good energy, but you can't feed the medium. They have to earn it. And that's what any good medium should do. So I would ask those questions of your friend if they recommend somebody, like, tell me about the reading. How specific was the information? How much did they know about you beforehand, and that kind of stuff. I know mediums are tired of people saying, well, you Googled me or looked me up on Facebook or whatever. Well, it can't happen with the people that I test because there's no access. They don't know who they're going to read for. And so, one thing you could do, if you want, it's a little tricky, but really good mediums don't tend to mind that much, but you could have somebody set it up for you under their name, and then, then you could just act like it was gifted to you. But, if you went to one of the people like I'm talking about, they've already been through the gauntlet, so it's not that big of a deal. And the really good ones don't want to know anything up front. They want to go in, just with pure information, because then the human mind gets in the way and they start thinking more analytically. You don't want that.
Yeah, that's if somebody gives you hints, they take you off your rhythm, and it is annoying to get information like that, because that means that they're trying to direct you in a direction as opposed to what spirit wants them to hear or needs them to hear. They're telling you what they want to hear, which makes it difficult.
Yeah, I remember one medium once telling me, tell Mark we're giving him what he needs to hear, not what he wants to hear.
Exactly.
So it's very similar.
Yeah, no, it's sometimes a hard profession to be in, because people come to you and they have wants, they have needs, they have hurts, they have issues they're working on, and at the same time, spirit maybe needs to tell them the purpose of the struggles and the burdens they're carrying, and how best to approach them with the talents and gifts that they have within. So it does make for a challenge, but it's an exciting thing, and I think what you're doing is amazing, because I would think any parent that has had a child pass away wants to know that child is okay, wants to know that that child is in the right hands. I think, being in this field as long as I have been, the one time that I had a door close on me was a couple, a mother and a grandmother that had a disabled child, and I was able to connect for them. I was able to give them their identifying criteria, and they were so thrilled that they kept coming back, and after a while they wanted an update every day, and I finally heard a door slam and somebody say, a spirit said to me, "You're not helping them or her." And
they got addicted. It's like heroin or
a
drug, for some people, and it should be used sparingly. I mean, that's something I talk to people about all the time. It's like, it's just one piece of a puzzle of healing. You want to have your own direct experiences if you can, even more than a mediumship read that can be done through a meditative practice or other means. And the mediumship reading can be great, but, I'd say, no more than once every 3 to 6 months, something like that, should be enough. And it's more about you healing to a point where you can have a joyful, productive life again. And that comes from a variety of different things. Comes from support from family and friends, comes from meeting other people who have been through the same thing as you have, just like what our organization provides, Helping Parents Heal, so that we have groups all over the place that people can meet and form friendships and relate to other people. And we have a conference people come to and mingle. And then, learning to give service in some way to other people, whether it's a soup kitchen or some other foundation for some meanwhile cause. When you give, it comes back to help heal you, and letting go of feelings of guilt that are holding you back, or feelings of anger or non-forgiveness for people you're blaming. That just hurts you. It's not easy to do, but that's important. And then, getting a reading and having this kind of proof of there being an afterlife and that your kid goes on. And maybe, things will never be the same. They're going to be different, but you can still have a relationship and know that they're well. And eventually you're going to be over there too. So you might as well make the most of your time while you're here, because you're here for a purpose.
Well, exactly. And I think I have found that lots of times, especially parents who have lost children, a lot of them have used it as a catapult into doing greater healing work themselves because of the loss of their child. It's triggered them into wanting to help others to a greater degree.
Absolutely, we've seen that a lot in our organization.
It's amazing how much healing can come from the loss of a child, and certainly when it's a child, it's precious. It's a child of spirit, and when they go to the other side, usually it means because they have completed their journey's purpose, and that you need to pick up the power that their passing gives you to get on to a greater degree of whatever your purpose is in life. And I've seen it happen over and over again. It's just, it's a miracle how something so tragic can become a miracle for so many other people. So it's
really interesting too to see the commonality in a lot of these kids. So many of them, the parents have described them just like my son, where they were highly empathetic people. They were very caring, very giving. They embraced kids who weren't popular. They didn't judge other people. They weren't hung up on recognition. They just were easygoing. So you could tell, what we call an old soul. A lot of them are what you call an old soul. They're highly developed in terms of their soul, their spirit, and didn't need to be here long. They were maybe here to teach us a path or rub off on other people and then have it multiply.
And the other thing that struck me from your book was that element of synchronicity. So many of us have the synchronicities happen in our lives. Say, well, that was cool, but what? But basically, when synchronicities happen, it's basically spirit saying you're on the right track. Keep going. And I don't think they make that connection. Synchronicities are wonderful. I love them. even if it's, finding a parking place when you didn't expect it, or having something massive happen to you that is just so unbelievable you can't believe it. Or frequently, sometimes people will say, I wanted to do something, I didn't have the money to do it. I decided I wouldn't put myself in debt for it because I can't afford to be in debt. But 3 weeks later, something happened, and I suddenly had that exact amount of money in my hand. And it's an amazing experience, and it does make you it sets you back on your heels. Even when you understand what it is so cool when it happens. It's just amazing. You did go through a test with your sister Robin, which I was fascinated with. Can you tell people what that test was and how it came about and the results from it?
I won't tell you the exact results because I don't want to steal the punchline of that chapter for people who buy the book. But I'll tell you how it came together and what, and kind of a general feel for how it went. But my sister was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. She had an unusual strain, so it wasn't usually it takes people out really quickly. But her strain was going to let her be around for a while, and I think she was around for maybe another year after the diagnosis. It did then later metastasize to her liver, and she was, getting near the end, and she was in hospice. And I had this idea, and really what spurred it on was me learning more about the old Houdini code. Harry Houdini, who was a magician and also a debunker of mediums, he would like to debunk them, but he also seemed to have some sort of interest in it and the possibility of an afterlife. So he had developed a secret code that he shared with his wife, and that code was Rosabelle Believe. That was the Houdini code. And so before he died, he told his wife, if anyone brings you the phrase Rosabelle Believe, you'll know that Houdini still lives on. So Houdini dies, and it's made public that there is a code, but no one knows what it is. And a medium, Arthur Ford, who is a well-known 20th century medium, came forth and gave the wife that code, Rosabelle Believe. It made the New York Times headlines, so it was a big deal. But then, leave it to the skeptic debunkers. Within a couple of days, they're coming out of the woodwork, alleging fraud, saying, well, you and the wife probably got together because you wanted the publicity, or, someone else knew what it was and told you, or whatever. So it's funny because if you look it up today, it'll say it was never solved. And the wife, pledged for sure that she didn't tell anyone about it, and she had no means of deception. But if you look it up today or Google it, it'll say it's never been solved. But that's not really true. It was solved by Arthur Ford. So I thought to myself, what was wrong with that experiment? And I thought, well, the problem was that any living person knew it, because then you could allege they'd spilled the beans, or that the medium got the information through telepathy with the living person. So I thought, how could you devise a better experiment? So what I thought of was, what if I had my sister write a secret phrase or whatever, and then put it in a sealed envelope where no one knew what she put in the envelope, and seal it and then initial the outside. So I brought the idea to her, just saying how I thought it could be helpful to people when she passed, that, she would try and come back through somebody, a medium, and share what the code was, or what the word or phrase or whatever she wrote was. I didn't give her any restrictions. I didn't say how many words or anything like that. I just said, just write anything that you want. And that's what we did. And then I reached out to Dr. Don Watson. Now, he's since deceased, but Dr. Watson was a neuroscientist, and he was very interested in this field, and he offered to help me execute the experiment. So we went through this process, and we basically eventually reached out to a bunch of mediums, and we got all their feedback of what they thought the phrase or word would be. And it was really interesting to see, the commonality in some of the phrasing, the accuracy of some of the things that we didn't know whether that was the phrase or not. But one medium in Scotland said Arizona. Well, my sister was in Arizona, and he had no way of knowing that. Another said Little House on the Prairie, which had been one of my sister's favorite shows. Another said, I have my teeth back. Well, my sister had some teeth pulled, in the latter years of her life, and they weren't replaced. So there were just a number of these kinds of things, but we didn't really know what was in the envelope till we opened it. So that was much later. And then we got one of the mediums saying, don't rush this because you may not get the right one. You need to be patient with this and wait a while. And then we had one, give us a message at the very last minute and submitted. So without stealing the thunder of the chapter, that I think people would appreciate what was there and reading, the final verdict, I would say the result was positive. I won't say it was precise or exactly what was written, but I think it was a positive result overall, and we really learned a lot too. And in fact, I'm working with Tricia Robertson on another experiment right now, and we'll be, once we get that done, I'll be putting out more information about that. But I'm kind of excited to be doing more of this kind of research and be part of this field with some folks who have been in it and are highly experienced.
There was a similar experience in the 1800s with mediums, and it's fascinating. It's fascinating. Every medium works differently, and so the information they get can give you an answer in a roundabout way. And I loved your phrase about how it can be enlightening or frustrating what a medium hands to you.
Yeah.
And
so as far as,
but the one that was done in the 1800s dealt with it was the 1800s, I'm sure, and it was very, very similar. And I think it was one of the men involved in it said that he would come back and he would give a message, and it was fascinating because they proved it. Now, beyond a shadow of a doubt, probably not, but they proved it. And I think that is happening over and over and over again, and people are beginning to realize that there is a whole other dimension out there, a whole other frequency of life and light, and to not acknowledge it and to communicate with it is a magical thing for sure. So go ahead.
I was just going to say, this book, The Persistence of the Soul, is a little different. The approach that I took with it was to share personal experiences, that personal narrative, my experiences, because people love that, and those things happened to me, and they were real. But I also included research and science supportive of that to kind of back it up, from the research that's been done in some of the organizations that do it. So what I think you were alluding to was back in 1882, the Society of Psychical Research was founded in London, and then there was an American branch. The ASPR was founded in the U.S., and William James, I think, was the head of that. But there were a bunch of highly respected UK English scientists back in the day that were in SPR, and these weren't second-rate scientists. They were like the cream of the crop. And so what's considered the pinnacle of evidence today goes back to something that happened, and it happened more than once, which are called the cross-correspondence experiments. One of the main ones happened after one of the original scientists had passed away. And then within a short period of time, there were a number of different mediums that were getting messages as fragments, and they were in different locations around the world. Independently, these messages were meaningless. But when they put them all together, the SPR put them all together, it formed a cogent message statement overall. And what this demonstrated was a conscious intelligence providing this information. So it seemed that the person who had passed, who had been a scientist, was trying to provide the ultimate validation that's possible, eliminating telepathy as a possibility, telepathy with a sitter, and other means of explanation. It's considered the gold standard, really.
Uh-huh. Yeah, when I read of that experiment, it was like, how can you argue with this? And it happened so long ago. And I think we're coming to a time here in today's society where people are more and more open to the aspect of spirit trying to get through to us. And I know every now and then I will smell my mother's powder, and my mother has been gone for 20-some years. and it's kind of like, well, welcome. Don't scare the cat.
So they're sentient.
Yeah, it's amazing, and there's so many different ways that those on the other side can correspond with you. It's not so much like picking up a telephone, but in a way, it's a metaphysical or a spiritual puzzle from time to time, and I call it magic. It just lets you know that there are energies out there that love you and that embrace you and that are trying to help you steer yourself through whatever the stuff is that's going on in this physical reality today. And there's some mediums too that can provide really highly detailed information that's just mind-blowing too. So I mean, not all of them are at that level. There's a handful, like Gordon Smith in Scotland, like that, who's just over the top in terms of his ability and just phenomenal. I met a woman recently in Phoenix named Farrah Gibson, who's really, really good. And we were meeting her and another medium, Michelle Clare, who's one of my certified mediums, a friend, for dinner. So we're sitting down talking about my son Brandon, and I just said, "Oh, Brandon played bass guitar," and then Farrah just pops up. She goes, "Well, he's telling me that, but he says his new one has an extra string." Well, Brandon, his original bass was a 4-string bass, but 3 months before his passing, for his birthday, he wanted a 5-string bass, and that's what we bought him. So he had a bass with an extra string. Now, what an obscure piece of information, Your son says his new one had an extra string. Yeah,
and,
but I think what mediumship, aside from the fact that to me it proves there is another dimension, another space, another wherever that awareness or consciousness goes, and it does tap in every now and then to check out and to see what's going on, within this reality. But there's more to it than just that. It is meant to give you an understanding that the spirit realm is not only there, but is there to serve, to help, to enlighten, to help you to make the right choices. It's kind of like hearing a voice or knowing it was your son or whatever. It gave you the impetus to move more deeply into the realm and to help to create a healing modality for other people as well, and for yourself as well. And so when it's not just, yes, I know that they're over there and their awareness is there, and it was proved beyond a shadow of a doubt. And so, okay, that's wonderful. Now, what are you going to do with that information? And it's sort of like it's a stepping stone. It's a key to open a portal to understanding and spiritual awareness on a far, far greater spectrum than most people believe.
And at a very basic level, just to help eliminate fear of death from people, and that sense of despair that people could have around that, so they can actually live a life fully.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, it's you don't have to create magic on a platform, as much as magic within your life, within yourself, and I think a lot of times too, it's a reminder that love knows no dimension. So that the love that is shared is still there. It's still embracing you. It's still very much a part of you and your life, and it's not gone. It's always there. And I think that's the other reason that I think spirit communication is proof of the fact that there is our spirits, our souls are immortal, and that once they've moved on, it doesn't mean that they forget us. It's just that they keep coming back and reminding us that there's magic here, and there's an ongoing journey that we're all on together. And I think that's the other important thing, that it doesn't have to be, and it can't be like those people that I talked about that wanted a daily upkeep. I didn't know how to stop them until I heard a door slam, and that was it. You're
trying to be nice.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't charging. This was in my mind, pastoral counseling. It's free. So, you don't charge for something that I have difficulty charging for something that was a gift to me. So, especially when it comes to mediumship. So, it was kind of like I kept trying to weed them off and say I'm busy or whatever, and it got to the point where when I did close the door, and I closed it gently, they absolutely spoke in nasty ways about me for, years afterwards. And but that's okay. That's just I learned something from it. But I think what you're doing is giving people the availability of people that are not frauds, that genuinely are helping and serving spirit in a very unique and wonderful way. So it's a magical gift that you've got, and I'm just curious where you're gonna. I'm kind of curious where you're going with this next.
Well, I don't know. So I think I have one more book in me, and it's probably going to be about what. In fact, it is because I've already started it, but it's got a ways to go about what it was like for me to grow up with the father I had. So a little more down that path, and I'll continue to work with the Helping Parents Heal organization, which I co-founded. It now has 26,000 members worldwide. It has 165 affiliate chapters worldwide, and our conference every other year draws 1,000 people. So I'll be involved with that, and maybe I'll be doing more, talks around and different things like that. So I'm still in the corporate world, but I'm not going to be in it that much longer, maybe a year.
I mean, I have to admit that I've talked to thousands and thousands of people in my years of doing podcasting and everything, and I've never, ever talked to anyone that's been in Mae West's bed.
Oh, yeah. That's too funny. So my dad counseled Mae West, as I'd mentioned, and so I was in Beverly Hills when he would have her come over there and do psychic demonstrations for her friends. So I was invited to go to this one. I got to meet her, and then she invited me and my dad and I think my sister to go on a tour of her apartment. And when I went in there, it looked like it was still in the 20s, kind of eerie. And then we went into her bedroom, and my dad said, could my son please sit on your bed so he could say he's been in Mae West's bed? And she says, yes. So I sat on the edge of her bed. My dad he was a character. He had quite a sense of humor.
Well, I think having this kind of a talent, he must have had a great deal of fun with it, too. I mean, I'm sure he was very serious about what he did, but it felt like he had an amazing sense of humor, so that, it must have been hell to you, but, to know that you couldn't lie.
Really.
To know
it was a bit restrictive, but not that bad. But there's an account from a man that people can find on my website I think I've got it on there under the media tab, but it's somebody who had actually seen my father at one of these Mae West demonstrations, and he wanted to, he asked my dad a question. Let's see, I guess I don't have it on there, doggone it. But he asked my dad a question pertaining to a child that had been born, and he suspected he might have been the father, but the girl denied it. This is years later. And then my dad gave him a piece of information to substantiate that, you are the father. And he told him something about the location of where the child was conceived. I wish I could find that right now. But it was a gentleman who saw him. He was in the Hollywood circles, and he was involved in that whole thing. But Tom Bleecker, I think, if people want to Google search, I think it's Tom Bleecker at Mae West House for Dr. Richard Ireland, something like that. Tom Bleecker, I think it was. But yeah, it's interesting just how many people he touched too, and how many people he helped over the years. I've had dozens of emails from folks who have given me remarkable stories, and that's going to be part of what I put in that next book too. just not only my own stories, but those that I've received from others who met him, were helped by him, and encouraged by him.
Well, he was an amazing man for sure. And, of course, you know, I wouldn't want to try to practice the same thing in his shadow. I mean, that's a big shadow. That's hard to step aside from. But, I mean, what you're doing is just phenomenal. I notice our time is getting short here. Do you want to give people your website and the places they can find you and reach you or contact you if
Sure.
they need to?
It's markirelandauthor.com, Mark with a K, Ireland like the country, author, markirelandauthor.com. And on that site, you know, you'll see my books. You'll see my media page, which has other interviews and videos, a short documentary, a bunch of different things. You'll see my appearance on a Discovery Channel episode where I was actually in the U of A lab for mediumship testing. You'll see links there to helping parents heal. So if you're a bereaved parent or you know one, you can use that as a resource. I've got a link to the Certified Medium program that I mentioned earlier. So if somebody's looking for a medium that's been vetted, they can go there. There's links to my dad's videos, his demonstrations of psychic phenomena and everything. So all that stuff there is there and more at markirelandauthor.com.
Wow. Well, it's certainly, you know, a site you can get lost in. And your father was amazing. I mean, there's,
yeah,
you know,
and they can contact me there too. There's a contact page, so if they wanted to reach out to me, there's my email address is right in there.
And you're going to be on Coast to Coast soon as well.
Yeah, this Friday night, March 22nd at 10 p.m. Pacific. I'll be on Coast to Coast.
That's an exciting thing as well. Well, I thank you so much. I thank you for writing the book. I think it was a great time for it to come out, for people to understand a little bit better about mediumship, and certainly you've given great guidance as to how to choose one and how to find somebody who can authentically give you information without asking you to, you know, some of the gypsies ask people to put money in a tin can and bury it near a cemetery.
Yeah.
I have a person who did that. Unfortunately, she was a good friend too, but she thought that this would be the way of healing herself, and it just lightened her load. It didn't heal anything. So I think the book is fabulous. It's amazing to read. It's an easy read, and it's one that you want to go back and look into and research yourself. So I thank you so much, and I will be in touch with you, and I'll send you a copy of this as soon as it hits YouTube.
Okay, thanks so much. And I did find that video from Tom Bleecker. I'll send you a link to that if you want to post it on that page on your site or whatever.
I'll be happy to. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks so much. Have a good night.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. It's been a pleasure, as always. Tune in tomorrow night. Have another great show then. Good night now.